Welcome to WIOA Disability-Related Reporting, a deep dive into the Participant Individual Record Layout, or PIRL. We are so happy that you're here with us today for the second part of our WIOA reporting webinar series. Today's webinar has two hosting projects. The first is the LEAD Center, which stands for Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities. And we are a Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, Policy Development Center of the Office of Disability Employment Policy. Social Policy Research Associates and National Disability Institute lead the LEAD Center. Our second host is the Workforce Data Quality Initiative, or WDQI, a project of the Employment and Training Administration that helps states build better connected data systems to better serve customers. Social Policy Research Associates leads the WDQI project. So that everyone can fully participate in today's webinar, we'd like to take a moment to share some captioning and housekeeping tips. Today's webinar is live captioned. The captions appear below the slide deck. You also have the option to open the captioning webpage in a new browser. The link has been posted in the chat box. You can adjust the background color, text color, and font using the drop-down menus at the top of the browser. Position the window to sit on top of the embedded captioning. If you have content questions today during this presentation, we really encourage you to ask them, please type them into the Q&A panel, and we will save time at the end for questions and answers. If your question is not content related, you can just type it into the chat box. If you are experiencing technical issues or have questions for the technical support team, open the participants list and select the raise hand button next to your name. To kick off our presentation today, welcome Tokir Ahmed. Tokir is a workforce analyst at the U.S. Department of Labor, Employment and Training Administration. He works within the Office of Policy Development and Research and is responsible for various performance accountability related tasks. He works on projects such as WIOA Performance Accountability Information Collection Requests for both the PIRL and quarterly performance reports, data validation guidance and technical assistance, also serves as the National Office Liaison for the Workforce Quality Initiative Grant. And recently, he's the new point of contact for the State Wage Interchange System. Tokir, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar WIOA Disability Related Reporting, a deep dive into the Participant Individual Record Layout, also known as the PIRL. I'm Tokir Ahmed from the U.S. Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration. I'm a workforce analyst within the Office of Policy Development and Research. There's a lot that our office is responsible for, including the PIRL. The PIRL actually originated in our office for the purpose of collecting data under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, also known as WIOA. The PIRL was a collaborative effort between DOL programs as well as the Department of Education. In addition, OPTR also manages the Workforce Data Quality Initiative Grant. And so DOL and the SPR/Bright Hive TA team are pleased to be co-sponsoring this webinar. DOL has been supporting the development of state-level LDS for nearly a decade. The kind of data integration and attention to program improvement Wisconsin is demonstrating in this webinar series is exactly what we want at DOL and hope to achieve with the grant. We're thrilled that our investments are helping to build an evidence base for improving services for people with disabilities. I do have two exciting updates on WDQI. First update, we now have a community of practice on the Workforce GPS page. Please check it out for the latest and greatest updates and resources and information regarding the grant and grantees. Even more exciting, DOL is anticipating another round of WDQI grants. Congress appropriated $6 million in funds that must be awarded by June 2021. So please be sure to sign up for news alerts from DOL and on our Workforce GPS page to make sure you are notified when the funding opportunity application becomes available. Moving on to today's webinar, we will be joined by speakers from the Wisconsin Workforce System, as well as staff from SPR. They will take a deep dive into the PIRL elements relating to disability and better define each of them. In addition, Wisconsin will share promising practices. So again, welcome everyone. I'm excited you all could join us and hope you find today's webinar useful. With that, I'll turn it back over to Laura.
Thanks, Toki. My name is Laura Aaron, and I'm the project manager of the LEAD Center and a senior associate at Social Policy Research Associates, or SPR. Today, you will also hear from Joshua Mallett, SPR's senior data programmer, and our special guest from Wisconsin's Department of Workforce Development, Bruce Paulskill, Assistant Division Administrator, and Brian Hipsch, Data Governance and Integration Manager. As most of you know, we held a related webinar on WIOA reporting last week. We'd love to find out if you were there. You'll see a poll in the web room. It asks, were you able to attend last week's webinar? And the answers are yes or no. You'll see that on the right side of your screen where you have participants lists and Q&A. There's a little polling piece, and all you need to do is just click yes or no, and then click submit, and it will calculate your response. So I just want to give you a moment to take that poll. Again, it's in its own panel on the right-hand side of the screen. You'll click just either yes or no, and then click submit. And I see we have responses coming in. Gonna wait just another moment. And Jesse, if you could report out on what percentage of people were here last week.
All right. So I'll share those poll results with everybody.
Okay, great. So we see that a little over, there was a lot of answers, but a little over 50% of those that responded, it looks like, were here last week. We really appreciate you completing that poll because that's just going to help us as we conduct our webinar today. So thanks for taking that moment. Okay, you can go ahead and close the poll. So today we want to share the definitions and coding for each PIRL disability-related data element and help everyone understand why we collect this data and how it benefits participants and programs. We'll also hear best practices from our partners in Wisconsin related to their case management system, guidance for their locals, and staff training. So why do we collect this data? WIOA challenges systems to fully realize workforce and education options that support low-income adults and youth in advancing their skills and in securing and retaining employment. And people with disabilities are more likely to be low income and often represent an untapped source of talent for employers. The more staff understand who they are serving, the better their programs can connect with and serve people with disabilities. Not only does serving more people with disabilities help the individual, it also helps programs. When WIOA programs know about other services available to people with disabilities to support employment, they are able to leverage additional funding to provide those services and ultimately decrease service silos through better coordination. Under the previous legislation, there was a disincentive to serve individuals with challenges or barriers to employment, including people with disabilities. WIOA took that disincentive away, and in fact, the Department of Labor takes into consideration who you serve when they set performance targets with states. And we'll hear more about that from Wisconsin later. For now, let's get to the data elements. The first data element is likely familiar to everyone. It asks whether a participant has a disability. Participants have 3 answer choices. Yes, I have a disability. No, I do not have a disability. Or the person may choose not to answer. Participants must be given all 3 choices. We recommend that you check not only your online system, but any paper intake copies to make sure that they provide these 3 choices. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, a disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the person's major life activities. The remaining 9 disability-related data elements are only for people who answered, yes, I have a disability on the previous data element. If a person does not have a disability, these 9 elements should be left blank. So for this next data element, called category of disability, participants may indicate their type of disability from a list of 7 different categories. They may choose more than one category. Again, it's important that the customer self-reports for this data element and that staff don't make assumptions or inferences. For example, if a case manager observes a customer in a wheelchair, they should not automatically note a physical or mobility impairment. The customer must indicate their category or categories of disability. We now move on to several data elements related to services. Many people in the field do not know about these services or what certain definitions or acronyms mean. This is an opportunity for training so that case managers and systems will be better equipped to serve customers with disabilities. This data element is called SDDA services, which stands for State Developmental Disabilities Agency. Developmental disabilities are a group of conditions due to an impairment in physical, learning, language, or behavior areas that began during the developmental period in a person's life that may impact day-to-day functioning. Most developmental disabilities begin before birth and last throughout a person's lifetime. Examples include attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, among many others. Every state and territory receives and administers federal funding to provide supports for individuals with developmental disabilities, including employment-related services. There are 2 response options for a participant with a disability for SDDA services. Yes, they've received services from the State Developmental Disability Agency, or no, they have not received SDDA services. Remember, the blank is for people without disabilities. So again, for people with disabilities, the answer options are yes or no. The next data element is LSMHA services, which stands for Local or State Mental Health Agency. While all states receive federal support via mental health block grants and partial funding of services provided through Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program, each state has freedom in designing and funding its mental health system. And there are employment and employment-related support services under these systems. Here, like the previous data element, there are 2 response options for a participant with a disability. Yes, they've received services from the local or state mental health agency, or no, they have not received LSMHA services. Remember, the blank is for people without disabilities. So again, for people with disabilities, the answer options are yes or no. Our next data element is Medicaid Home and Community-Based Services, or HCBS for short. Within broad federal guidelines, states can develop home and community-based services waivers to meet the needs of people who prefer to get long-term care services and supports in their home or community, rather than in an institutional setting. Generally, states offer HCBS waivers to people with physical disabilities, adults and children with developmental disabilities, people aged 65 or over, and medically fragile people who may require life support or other extensive medical equipment. Again, some of your participants could receive these services and may even receive employment services under the Medicaid HCBS program. It's another potential collaboration. The response options for people with disabilities are the same here as they were for state developmental disabilities agencies and local and state mental health agency services. It's yes or no. I know we're going through these elements at a somewhat quick pace. So if you have any questions about any of the elements as we present them, please type your question into the Q&A panel and we'll answer it toward the end of the webinar. Okay, this next data element is focused on a participant with a disability's type of work setting. And there's several options to choose here. The first is called competitive integrated employment. Basically, this refers to a work setting where people with and without disabilities work together, and where rates of pay and duties, benefits, location are all comparable between employees with and without disabilities and positions. So again, this is competitive integrated employment, and again, refers to work settings where people with and without disabilities work together. The second type of work setting is called supported employment. Supported employment is also employment in an integrated setting with and without people with disabilities, but the difference is that it is with ongoing support services for individuals with the most significant disabilities. The most common model of supported employment involves job coaching for someone with a disability. The coaching allows an individual to obtain and retain employment in a competitive setting. The third type of work setting is called group supported employment. This is supervised employment for small groups of workers with disabilities in the same work setting. For example, 2 to 8 people could receive on-site supervision in an integrated work environment with people with and without disabilities. The last type of work setting is a sheltered workshop. While sheltered workshops provide employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities, this model is being phased out to avoid isolating people with disabilities and to help them transition to more fulfilling employment. It's actually being replaced with home and community-based services, the HCBS services I discussed earlier. If a person with a disability has a work setting, that setting is recorded. If they are not currently employed, that is recorded. Again, the blank is for people without disabilities. I'll now turn it over to my colleague Joshua to clarify the remaining disability-related data elements.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Laura. So I'm going to continue through the remainder of these disability-related elements, as Laura stated. So first, let's talk about this next data element, customized employment services received, which is focused on a person with a disability's type of customized employment services. There are several options for the participant to choose. The first option is whether or not the participant with a disability received discovery assessment services. Discovery assessment services provide an assessment process to find out who a person is. This determines the elements that are crucial to a person's employment success. This will usually include a variety of activities, like interviewing the individual and people who know the person well, like family, friends, support staff, as well as observing that person in various settings doing typical day-to-day activities. The second option is whether or not the person with a disability developed a customized employment search plan. This is a plan developed toward meaningful employment that determines a list of potential employers and conducts an analysis of benefits using the information learned about an individual job seeker. The third option is whether or not the participant with a disability received employer negotiation services. These are services where a job seeker or a job developer or employment coach on behalf of the job seeker has negotiated accommodations with employers. And the last option here is whether or not this individual with a disability received secure, unsubsidized employment as a result of receiving customized employment services or extended support services. If a person with a disability has received one of these services or developed a customized employment search plan, that specific option is recorded here. If they have received none of these customized employment services nor developed a plan, that is then recorded. As with the previous PIRL data elements that Laura went through, the blank is for people without disabilities. Moving on to the next element, this is a data element focused on a participant with a disability's financial capability. Specifically, it identifies whether or not the person with a disability has received benefit planning services or financial capability or asset development services. If a person with a disability has specifically received just one of these services, then that option is selected. However, if they have received both benefit planning services and financial capability or asset development services, then the option indicating they've received both of these services, is recorded. If they have received none of these financial services, however, then instead that option is recorded. And again, like before, the blank is specifically for people without disabilities. This next data element is focused on a participant with a disability's individualized education program status. It's specifically identifying whether or not the participant with a disability currently has or has formerly had an individualized education program or special education services while attending secondary school. Now, an individualized education program, or IEP, is a plan used to ensure that students with disabilities eligible to receive special education and related services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act receive services tailored to meet their unique needs in the least restrictive environment to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. To be eligible for an individualized education program, the student generally must be between ages 3 and 21, be in need of special education and related services, and have a qualifying disability in one of 13 categories required under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that impacts their educational performance, including such disability categories as autism, deafness, and blindness. If a person with a disability currently has an IEP while attending secondary school, then that option is recorded. Or if they formerly had an IEP while attending secondary school, then instead that option is recorded. If they are not currently in, nor formerly had, an individualized education program or special education services, then the option where neither condition applies is recorded. And as a reminder, just as before, the blank is specifically for people without disabilities. And finally, the 10th and last data element of the disability-related data elements in the PIRL is whether or not a participant with a disability has a Section 504 plan. And what exactly is a Section 504? Well, Section 504 is a federal law that protects students with disabilities that interfere with their ability to learn or access school programs from discrimination by schools receiving federal financial assistance. Students are entitled to receive a free and appropriate education comparable to students without disabilities. So a Section 504 plan can be used to get reasonable accommodations for an individual with a disability that falls outside of the 13 disability categories required under the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, or who does not need special education and related services. More specifically, it outlines how the individual's specific needs will be met through accommodations, modifications, and other services. If a person with a disability has a Section 504 plan, then that option is recorded. If they don't have a Section 504 plan, then instead, that option is recorded. And again, the blank is for people without disabilities. So now that Laura and I have fairly quickly covered with all of you each of the 10 disability-related data elements and their specific code values, we hope this has helped to shed some light on why we collect these data and how it benefits participants with disabilities and programs. Laura, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thanks, Joshua. And, you know, I want to encourage folks, you can use this recorded webinar as a training in the field. Why not? You know, maybe at a state training, maybe at local trainings. You can take 5 minutes up to only, 15, to help people understand what these acronyms mean, what these possible services could mean for an individual, how you can also discuss how you might collaborate with other programs. So I encourage you to do that. We will develop other tools, but just in the meantime, why not use this as a training device? So thank you, Joshua. We now turn to Wisconsin, and we're so pleased that staff from the Wisconsin's Department of Workforce Development have returned to share more promising practices. These practices and those that they shared last week are clearly producing great data in their state. I'll hand it over to Bruce Paulskill.
Thanks, Laura, and I'm glad to be here again. And I'm just going to make a few comments on behalf of the landscape of Wisconsin before I turn it over to Brian, because he's the lion's share of our presentation today. But I thought it would be helpful just to kind of set the stage for how we've been structured in Wisconsin for a long time. We were one of the first states in the country, and certainly parts of our state, that was developing job centers back in the 1980s. And I say that because I think that's led to maybe why we are at least pretty successful in collecting a lot of information. We've had a strong, decades-long history of collaborating amongst all of the key workforce partners, and many of them were under the same roof long before job centers were being referenced as such. And I think that matters, and I think that matters for a couple of reasons. I think that that's led to a lot of trust between the agencies, but maybe more importantly, I think it's led to an understanding on a lot of the mutual constituents that we serve, that's all they know when they're looking for services through our workforce system. They just know there's a bunch of players underneath one roof working collaboratively together. So when they come in and they're asked to provide a lot of information, both through online registration tools and through other means of collecting information that we may use as far as comment intake forms or initial referral forms, I think they understand that the people that they're working with are here to help them. And so I think it's led to maybe a sense of trust that they know that we're not going to misuse the information that they're providing to us. So that includes a lot of our typical partners, Job Service and the workforce boards, which were the private industry councils, DVR. A note about DVR, voc rehabilitation. They moved into our State Department quite a few years ago and have been within our job centers for a long time. So I think that's helped as it specifically relates to some of the disability information. We've got a lot of data sharing tools in place. We're still working on more of that. WIOA has set the stage for us to do more in the space of data collaboratives, data sharing, data transparency. Our most recent WIOA state plan, we have now added at the state level 3 more state agencies to our combined plan, what we call the Department of Children and Families, Department of Health Services, Department of Corrections. So really looking forward to even more collaboration on behalf of our TANF programs and our food share programs and our reentry programs, many of which also would talk about mutual customer clientele with the persons with disabilities potentially, and looking forward to even having a stronger data collaborative. So we're pretty proud of the history we've had with collaboration and with partnerships. And that's really just to set the stage for Brian Hipsch, one of our key staff that deals with our data and our performance information, go through and share what we do and how we do it in Wisconsin. So Brian, I'm going to hand it over to you for the remainder of the presentation.
Hello, friends. Thank you for bringing me back to Wisconsin to discuss the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development's collection of WIOA data. As mentioned, my name is Brian Hipsch, the Data Integration Governance Manager for the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. I recently transitioned roles from WIOA performance and reporting to a more global position within the department, working on our Workforce Data Quality Initiative grant, which we are intending to develop a workforce data integration system to help streamline more of the data sharing aspects and our research and evaluation capabilities. So last time I discussed how the state's increased emphasis on the quality and the open collection of data, its partnerships and outreach attributed to the success and results that are on this slide. Today, I will discuss some more of the details of how the data is collected in the system and how we engage our workforce program staff. Next slide, please. One of the beliefs we had about maximizing the amount of data we were able to collect was to provide the context behind why we were asking the questions that comprise our reports, the participant individual record layout, or the federal reporting requirements. That is the required collection required for the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act and a number of its partner programs administered through the Department of Labor. So the required collection or the questions that must be asked of a participant before they begin participation, they are vast. We were concerned about receiving truthful responses. And then the second part is we were worried about decreasing staff morale. So I believe that there are 2 ways to get a person to answer a question truthfully when you're running a program like this. First, provide the context for collection and still trust the answer will not be used inappropriately, as Bruce alluded to. When these conditions are met, I think the desire by the respondent to give complete and truthful information is more likely. This background information provides the purpose, whether staff or the clients agreed to the purpose or not. So essentially, we are forming some type of a legitimacy around the collection instead of leaving the client wonder, what is the government going to do with my data and why did they want to know this? That's important to getting voluntary disclosure. So as I mentioned last time, I don't have any proven explanations why Wisconsin's workforce customers answer these questions at greater rates than other states. After initial discussions with the Social Policy Research Associates. Our state learned that all the common sense things, such as making the fields mandatory in the system, were not unique to our state. There must be some other explanation. And so today I'm going to continue to discuss the approach that's been gaining some traction in Wisconsin DWD. Last time I talked about the importance of data management concepts such as data governance and data stewardship, and how that led to the, just that effect where, if you read a lot of books, you may become smart in something, even if you intended to become smart in that one thing or not. And the same thing if you're sports analogy, if you're a football team, you practice a lot, you might end up with a good defense. So if we have good data management practices, we might be good at reporting disability related data. And that wasn't our intent, that we would be really good at this, but we're glad it happened. So let's talk a little bit now about the obvious benefits for workforce providers when they receive complete data. The benefits here help provide motivation for the providers, whether they're the local workforce board contractor, our department, Bureau of Job Service, or the Office of Veterans Employment Services, to assist workforce clients and customers to provide this information. Our staff assist by explaining the purposes for and reassure our customers that their data is secure. And this is also messaged through the release of information form that they all have to sign. I'll highlight the impacts of the statistical adjustment model on the performance goals at the end of the year later in the webinar. I believe our state was successful early at messaging how the characteristics of the participants served and the economic conditions impact the end of year adjustment. That's now mandated under WIOA and being adopted by a few other programs. Additionally, the state and local areas benefit by enhancing their evidence-based activities or evidence-building activities. By having enough and accurate data, it increases the effectiveness of research and evaluations that can be done in the future. Operational reporting also helps tell providers information about the scope of their activities. Everybody likes to get good feedback about what they are doing, whether it's a scoreboard of your favorite baseball team, your report card, or information about something else you have interested. And everybody likes to have, valid, positive feedback. And those who want to excel, they don't mind finding out that there are opportunities to improve as long as it's a valid information. Next slide, please. So here are a number of the benefits that I discussed again last time that the customers receive when they're able to provide that information. That number one point, I think it just goes into, and it cascades into the other one on the screen. Inform career planners, informing, the way that entire career plan can be put together and all the right moves and all of the right synchronizations that can be done throughout the workforce system. That's the biggest benefit that the customers have. And once we communicate clearly that that's what's in it for them, then I think the experience becomes a lot better and it becomes more efficient. Next slide, please. And employers, as I mentioned last time, they also benefit from this type of data, especially when our system, through usually our business service team, models the ADA, tries to help fill those gaps between what, what the employer's needs are and then what all of our various customers can bring to them. And so you can review that slide for a few seconds. And then we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, at the point of registration, which is the initial touch point between the customer and the workforce system, we ask the most basic of the disability related questions. Do you have a disability? And it simply appears as disability. Most often, this answer is reported through registration into the Job Center of Wisconsin. This is because consistent with the Department of Labor guidance through the participant individual record layout, the PIRL, we only ask the reportable individuals, whether they have a disability or not. The application allows the values that are the same options that are offered on the PIRL. If the person does not register through the JCW website, Job Center of Wisconsin, before applying for a workforce program, the same question is asked on a paper form and then entered directly into the asset case management system. Asset from last time is the automated system support for employment training. It is the management information system for Wisconsin's Title I, III, Jobs for Veterans State Grant, Trade Adjustment Assistance Act, and a couple of other state programs. The customer records in JCW and Asset are linked, and so what gets put into JCW does end up going to the Asset system. The application also provides the opportunity to make the information about the customer confidential. You'll see that's the bottom option there. And this is often used to suppress information about customers to ensure their information is not accessed by other non-interested staff. There are a number of situations where that is a necessary feature. Although our staff are professional and have all signed the data use policy, this administrative function enforces policy compliance. Let's go to the next slide, please. You will notice that these slides do not have direct screenshots from the asset application. I like to tell people for their security, they won't let me access the application to take the screenshots. But the truth is that for security considerations, screenshots of asset are not allowed to be posted on public websites or where it is viewable by non-authorized users. And that's why these are appearing on a spreadsheet template. This is just another method to ensure the privacy of our participants is preserved. I also must note that the fields in Asset do not list the PIRL number next to them. This was added to this webinar to help link the field to the PIRL field. Next slide, please. So the biggest difference between the question on the previous slide and the questions on the next few slides are these questions are only asked when a reportable individual is in the process of becoming a participant. Where I mentioned that disability was available for reportable individuals and anybody who made a touch into our system, these questions only appear when a participant is trying to access participant level services, specifically through the WIOA Title I Adult Dislocated Worker, Youth, Title III Wagner-Pizer, Dislocated Worker Grants, and the Jobs for Veterans State Grant. The Trade Adjustment Assistance Act program only answers the category of disability on the last slide. This is all consistent with the PIRL specifications and requirements. The Title I programs, often they end up using a paper application to report this data. Title III program participants who are also RESEA, that's the Reemployment Services Eligibility and Assessment, those participants collect the detailed questions on an online assessment. Otherwise, remaining Title III and JVSG, Jobs for Veterans State Grant participants, report on a paper application. Regarding these questions, so these fields ask the more invasive questions about the types of services that an individual with a disability may have accessed and we're interested in. So it's beneficial to have the staff know what the field's names are. Many in our workforce system may not exactly know what the SDDA or the LSMHA or the HCBC services are. And then, so training is the first part of the staff. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then there's a little bit of additional empathy is needed because these questions are asked sometimes in person prior to a participant becoming a participant or being eligible for a program. So for example, the state disability, SDDA is the State Developmental Disability Agency, the LSMHA is the local or state mental health agency. These questions represent a couple of challenges. First, that those acronyms are not familiar to our customers, and the second is they ask about some of the larger stigmas out there that people who are looking for employment may not want to be disclosing. So again, it's just ensuring that our staff know about these fields So in the event there are questions while these are being answered on either on the paper form in person or even on an online application, that our staff are trained up a little bit in that. Let's go to the next slide, please. The data elements, here it's like the previous ones, except this one focuses on whether a person's in employment that is generally reserved for individuals with disabilities. A response is required if for everybody who reports that they have a disability. Many of our staff may not be familiar with these types of employment. So in that separate sheet that I'll talk about a little later, we have defined some information about the specific types of employment they are and which programs in Wisconsin they administer. And then another part, so this PIRL element, this individual with disability work setting, it is actually on, these are all on the same page. So in our program section, it's the individual with disability, and then all of these flow right below it. They open up if the individual with disability is said yes, and then all these other ones will come. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this data element focuses on the type of customized employment services. Again, this requires staff skills to listen and interpret what the individual is talking about, because they may not know those by these exact names. So many of these services are administered by other programs outside of Asset, and so there's some familiarity that our staff would need. Let's go to the next slide, please. And this slide represents a service provision for those who receive financial capacity. And in Wisconsin, the financial capacity training is provided through the Department of Health Services. So next slide, please. And these two data elements focus on individuals with disabilities with education plan, and similar to the other previous fields, the workforce staff may not be familiar with them. So that's why we created the handout. And when these changes were, well, they're not changes anymore, when this was all implemented into the system a number of years ago, because these are all new questions. We also put into this handout the, what agency is providing these services. So it'll just help with that interpretation piece. So I mentioned Department of Health Services earlier. So if somebody, a client talks about, I'm in health services, then that's helps them identify, well, this could be what you're talking about if you don't say, the exact thing by name. Let's go to the next slide, please. So last time I discussed how these issues have been messaged through webinars to staff. Even before COVID-19 began, WIOA Performance Friday webinars provided a consistent and systemic way to discuss data-related issues. I'll highlight just two topics that have helped to drive the data-driven culture in Wisconsin. The first is the statistical adjustment model, and then the second is training on PIRL data elements such as these. These webinars have highlighted the importance of data collection and tied it into something that is very relevant to staff, and that relevant use is performance. A lot of uses for data may not provide, direct impact to staff. For example, research and evaluations take months to years to complete, and the results often never get down to staff, or they're in an article and they may or may not have the time to read those. So what we're trying to change in Wisconsin is, the research papers are deep, and sometimes they get the findings out in a timely manner. And so the implementation of a lot of those findings is not done directly by staff. It's usually through some other systemic changes by higher level management. However, ETA's statistical adjustment model is a use of data that directly impacts staff. Previously, staff were only concerned about the performance levels. Now the characteristics of participants served and the economic conditions come into play. Staff are now concerned about collecting more data that was previously only impacted them to determine whether the participant was eligible or not, and then ultimately what their final outcome was. So the model ETA statistical adjustment model has been a strong driver of culture change. Let's go next slide, please. And just a little bit more about the statistical adjustment model. It was mandated in WIOA section 116. It was applied to the WIOA programs at the beginning of the program year to inform target setting, and at the end of the program year to adjust performance level. It's a method to more fully consider variables that impact performance levels. The model helps to objectively determine whether what the performance should have been during the year, considering additional variables. Under the Workforce Investment Act, if your goal was 80%, it didn't matter if you met it by succeeding with 4 successes out of 5 participants, or 80 out of 100, 800 out of 1,000, and it also didn't matter who the 5, 10, or 1,000 customers served were. They could have been employment ready without any type of negative employment influencer. So this model helps to enforce the spirit of WIOA in the face of performance expectations. So this is no different in Wisconsin. We work to promote this culture change by running the statistical adjustment model at a state level at the end of the year, end of the program year, even before it came into effect, which is, I believe, this coming year. So we did that, and then ensure that that documentation was made available on the state's performance accountability SharePoint site. And so we could demonstrate that, you know, here are these adjustments that are being made to your performance levels or your goals. And these, in the future, which I believe starts in 2020, these adjustments are actually going to be, you're going to be assessed on these adjustments. And so this is how we made it real for staff and local management. And so it's been a really good driver of that data-driven change. Let's go to the next slide, please. So these fields were introduced into our system back in October of 2017, and I had developed a short document on what each of the data elements were and how they applied to the workforce. The document had links to where the programs applied in Wisconsin. I also explained that the reason these were being collected was due to because the federal government was looking to do future research to determine how different service delivery concepts improved outcomes for various populations. So there was emphasis that any participant did not have to disclose the answer. We weren't going to stop anybody, but we had to at least ask the question. And these were all just attempts to improve the level of reporting done so the data collection had the most value possible. And then, of course, maintaining relationships with our customers. Let's go to the next slide, please. And then this slide just shows the different ways that the data is collected and put into our systems. The Job Center of Wisconsin registration provides the basic reportable individual information. Normally, this is where we get that initial answer about whether the person is an individual with disability or not. Then the program, as that customer moves towards participation, must collect the more detailed information about the participant's disability status. So we have a number of different steps depending on which path the customer is taking. Some programs have intake and applications form. And then we are moving towards the common intake and working to share data across the program so we can avoid the number of times we ask the same questions over and over. And so that's being worked on by an integrated service delivery team. Let's go to the next slide, please. So today I've discussed how the fields related to disability and are collected in our application and how the state engages its program staff. I hope everyone was able to take something away from our presentation today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian, for sharing your promising practices. I am sure that they will help other states and local areas better understand how to implement a plan that really benefits everyone. This is your time, participants, to enter questions into the Q&A panel. I see a couple so far. I'll give you a minute to do that. I just want to remind everyone that after the webinar, we encourage you to go back to the online data visualization tool that Joshua shared last week and share it with your colleagues. Look for a link in the chat. If someone can put a link to the tool in the chat, that'd be awesome. And then also for more information on the status of disability-related reporting nationwide, you can access a 5-page brief on the Lead Center website. And lastly, Wisconsin developed written guidance for their state around the disability-related data elements, and Brian referred to that. And that you'll be able to access that document along with the slides and the recording and transcript from today's webinar sometime next week. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also look forward to additional TA tools in the next year. We will keep you in the loop. Now it's time for questions and answers. So far, I see a couple of questions here. And what's super interesting is this is either from the same person. Anyway, one question is about PIRL data element 209. And Joshua, if you can go to the next slide. And 209, as you recall, everyone has all of these things memorized. I'm kidding. 209 is the financial capability. So it asks, did a person with a disability receive benefit planning services, financial capability, or asset development services, or both of these services? And the question from someone is, who can provide those financial capability services? You know, often nonprofits are providing those services. Also, as you know, financial literacy is one of the 14 required elements for youth, for WIOA youth. And so your youth service providers or their partners can provide those services. If you have additional questions related to 209, if I did not answer your question, that was from Amy Wamsley, add a little note there in the Q&A. Appreciate it. Another question that came in was very interesting. It said, is there a way to cross-reference these disability types with disability types from IDEA? And I want to catch everyone up. That question came in when we were talking about category of disability. And as you remember, under WIOA, people can choose many categories of disabilities, and we shared those categories. But under IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, there is different coding for the categories or types of disabilities. I want to share for those that don't know, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is a law that makes available a free and appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities throughout the nation. It ensures special education, but it's not just for children, it's also for youth with disabilities, which that's where the crossover is probably of age. And I'm going to just say it's a really great question, but there is different coding. But I am sure, maybe Brian, you have an idea as to how you can cross-reference that coding, or maybe Wisconsin has done something like that.
Well, we haven't matched up IDEA with the PIRL at all, so we haven't explored that.
Okay, great. But it's a great question, and we're going to follow up on that. So thank you, Stephen Todd, for that question. Let me see if there are other questions that have come in that are content related. Okay, I think those really were our two questions. And if you can go to the next slide, Joshua. You know, I want to encourage folks to, if questions come to you later, and Joshua, if you can go to the next slide. questions come up to later, oh, I'm sorry, go back one slide. There was a delay on my end. That you reach out to us as you take a look at these materials after they're posted next week. You can email us, connect with us. We'd love to hear your questions. And now next slide. I also want to remind folks, in addition to connecting with the LEAD Center, you could also follow the Workforce Data Quality Initiative. Next slide. Feel free to sign up to receive both LEAD Center and WDQI newsletters. WDQI also has some really cool podcasts to listen to. We thank you for attending today's webinar and wish you the best in your endeavors to better connect with and serve people with disabilities. Take care, everyone.